I'm Jon Jackson. I teach over on computing. I lead on digital apprenticeship, degree apprenticeship program. My background is kind of technical. So I started off as a coder in my bedroom when I was a teenager, into code, building websites back in the day. And I built really terrible websites and seen kind of technology change over the years and the decades. So as I understand it, I'm here to talk about, well, lots of, I guess, emerging technologies. So on my list, I think I've got AI and machine learning, cloud computing, e-commerce, mobile commerce. So simple. I'm going to talk about all those things in just an hour. So we'll see how we get on. Okay, cool. Well, look, let's just, I have no slides. I don't like lecturing anyway, so let's just have a chat. We'll kind of look at things online. We'll use the browser to talk through those topics in an hour is pretty difficult anyway, but let's see what we can dig into. Picking up on the first topic, and I will ask questions, so get your brains in gear, or I will ask you to ask questions. What is artificial intelligence? Oh my goodness, that's that question. What is artificial intelligence? So I guess you've all watched sci-fi movies, or or comic books or whatever, and Blade Runner, and kind of artificial synthetic humans, right? And what we're not there yet, but when we talk about intelligence, what is intelligence? Well, I suppose we define intelligence from the point of view of being human intelligence, right? Sometimes we are intelligent, not always. And I suppose artificial intelligence is the creation of what seems like intelligent thought from something that's not human, right? So that's a kind of broad umbrella. When we talk about artificial intelligence, it is a broad umbrella. So machine learning, for example, can be put within artificial intelligence. There are even things like optical character recognition, OCR. That's so we now it's built into our phones now. So if you've got an iPhone, for example, you take a photo and you can just, if you took a photo of that on the wall, or this, you could then just tap and hold and select the text. It kind of automatically does it. Back in the day, one would say that is kind of artificial intelligence. Now it's kind of normal, so we don't really class it as AI. In terms of how we can use sort of AI, how is AI used in business? There's lots of ethical considerations right around AI as well. Throw me some ideas. How can AI be used in business or marketing or HR, either ethically or not? Have you heard of the fourth industrial revolution or industry 4.0? Heard of that? Have you heard of the industrial revolution, like with trains and steam and stuff like that? So now industry 4.0 is kind of, we've already had kind of a technological revolution in terms of automation and robotics, and so that now we can have cars that get sort of pumped off the assembly line instead of using humans, right? But AI is like a next level, right? It's emergent behavior. It's not just pre-programmed. That's the difference. So it then looks like, oh, AI can create stuff for us. Is it though? I mean, we'll talk about that. Have you formally spoken about ChatGPT in class? Yeah, awesome. Have people used ChatGPT? Yeah. Okay, let's have a play, shall we? We'll see if it's up first. So herein lies the ethical minefield of AI. So what do people know about ChatGPT, and what are potentially some of the ethical considerations around ChatGPT? So we're into ChatGPT now. Okay, ChatGPT, it's everywhere. You've probably heard about it. There's lots of differing opinions on it. It seems it can do some really cool things. Okay, and I'm going to show you some of the cool things it can do. I'm also going to show you some of the stupid things it can do, and why we still, as humans, require critical thinking to use a tool like this. Okay. So I've got some history here. So I was curious. I wanted to, you can see that. So I asked it a question. Can you find me a list of reputable academic sources from within the last 5 years, along with a useful quote from each of them on the topic of learning effects online collaborative learning? Okay, so I was being a lazy academic. I wanted it to go and find me stuff on a particular topic, and I wanted academic references. And it returned me this kind of stuff. That looks pretty compelling, right? Wow, it's like I want to go and read these these articles, and it gave me a quote. So if I didn't stop and think, I might copy and paste that quote and or paraphrase it and put it in a report and, quote the author, the date. Guess what? Doesn't exist. Made it up. Mm. The authors exist. The authors exist. The titles do not. The quotes do not. It has been generated. This comes back to what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is a generative pre-trained transformer. So it's generative. That's why we think it has it seems like it has emergent behavior, because it generates stuff. It's pre-trained because it's just trained on knowledge and stuff that's already out there. And it transforms, it basically processes, it transforms data and comes up with stuff that sounds smart. Sometimes it's really not, because it'll make stuff up. The danger is that its level of confidence is like 100%. I even told it, yeah, those are made up. Can you go and find some real ones for me? And it said, oh, sorry about that. I apologize for the mistake. Here are some real academic sources on the topics of, guess what? They're made up. So engage critical thinking. You've heard of the topic of critical thinking and critical analysis in being human. It's a real issue. The problem is, like with ChatGPT compared to something like Google, if we're Googling, we get lots of results, right? We get millions of results, and we kind of have to sift through them and engage critical thinking and analyze and understand. With something like this, because its level of confidence is like 100%, it comes across as being confident, and we could just take it as whatever it says. There's an inherent danger in that. And that can be like quite significant danger. When it comes to things like, if we're using it for trivial things, then fine, no big deal. But when questions come up about, so my background is programming and writing code. So ChatGPT can be used to kind of write code. There are other automated sort of code kind of AI tools as well, which are fantastic. If you know what you're doing, they can help you go 10 or 100 times quicker, but you still got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's like, a baby with a knife, right? To put it bluntly, it's kind of dangerous. So you have to use these things with caution. That's a kind of a bad example. A really good example, what these things can be really useful for. So a project that I'm working on with some colleagues over in the healthcare side of the university, we've built, it's like, have you heard of Duolingo, right, for learning languages? So it's like Duolingo for medical terminology. So for all the complex medical terminology and the different breaking up the word parts. So, complex diseases have long names and they're made up of word parts, and we've created an app that has flashcards and automated questions, etc. One of the biggest tasks is the data set isn't out there, is not only the words, but the breakdowns of the words and the meanings of those word parts. And so we're creating that library. So I decided to have it go with ChatGPT. So this was the prompt, and I was explicit as possible, right? I said, this is what I want. I want a table of medical terminology split into word parts. And I told it prefix, root, suffix, along with the word part definitions as well. And I specified the columns. Whether it would have figured that out without me saying that, I'm not sure, but I wanted to tell it. And then I specified not all the words will have a prefix or suffix. All words will have a root, and some words will only have a root. Okay, hit go. And it gave me this. And I can confirm that this is correct. So, and if I wanted to, I could, well, that's because this is contextual, give me another 10. Let's see if it's working. So we'll let it work away. You can see what it does, which is kind of pretty cool. Hopefully, if it doesn't crash. So it's the reason that this works is that those definitions, those words. I mean, I checked it with my colleagues that one would feel that you feel like you would still want to double check, but that information is out there. It's just kind of collating it. It's almost like a virtual assistant, right? And that's powerful. So here you go. It's kind of a little bit slow, but it's giving us this is it. This is it generating. This is ChatGPT kind of doing its thing. So dermatitis, actually, most people maybe heard of that. Inflammation of the skin. So derm means skin, itis means inflammation. I think that is correct. I'm learning lots, but it's giving us some data, right? It's kind of pretty cool. You're pretty mesmerized. Right? Now, what about let's talk about like marketing copy, or in the context of business, we can think like, what about contracts? We can get it to write contracts, or we can get it to write threatening sounding legal letters to demand customers to pay us. People be doing that, or it can generate marketing copy for us, right? Has anybody tried that out of interest or anything like that? Yeah. So if we get time, we might try it. Can anybody think of what's the potential problem of kind of getting it to generate seemingly sensible content, marketing content, or even product description content? I mean, what are the upsides? What are the downsides? Throw some at me. Upsides and downsides. I mean, you're highlighting like a real sort of fundamental problem with information and disinformation and where people get their information from anyway, right? Because we don't need AI for Twitter to be a hellhole, right? Humans do a good enough job of it. But I'm on there, by the way. I use Twitter all the time. Just full disclosure, not knocking it. Just certain areas you probably want to stay away from. So I guess an upside is it's kind of it's easy, right? We could just tell it to write stuff for us, and then we can copy and paste it and put it online. We could put it on a e-commerce website. Just on the bit of a digression. So for those that are interested in e-commerce or mobile commerce, I've seen some people using kind of generative sort of text AI like ChatGPT to generate kind of optimized descriptions and meta tags. Have you heard of meta tags? Like, so when you search anything on Google, you can see like the title that comes up and the short description. So Google is kind of intelligently, well, again, Google is using AI in a sense to kind of extract the most relevant bits of information from that page to then throw it at you on the Google search results. But we can actually kind of, if we're building a website, we can control what kind of comes at the top. We can tell Google what this page is about. So we can kind of almost create a summary, and we can create a title and kind of tell Google, this is the title of the page, this is what it's about. And we call that kind of meta tags. Meta means sort of metadata is data about data, right? It's information about the page. It's not the actual page, but it's information about it. Where was I going with that? So yeah, so I've said some people, because that's not necessarily critical information, but having unique, if you've got 1,000 product pages or 10,000 product pages, if you want to create unique descriptions for each of those products, actually an automated tool, when it's kind of fairly low risk, if it's, you're selling, if it, like something low risk, not medical or anything like that, you can kind of generate this unique information for each page, which Google at the moment loves, right? They love unique content. So if you talk about marketing, online marketing, and search engine optimization or SEO, Google loves unique, up-to-date, sort of fresh content. I imagine, I mean, I don't know if you've heard that there are, because of the way ChatGPT generates content, there are tools that can pretty well identify whether it's kind of AI generated content because of the way it's constructed. And who knows, actually, Google might start penalizing AI generated content, which would probably be a good thing. So yeah, so there are, on the topic of e-commerce or like automated marketing efforts, when you want to do a stuff in bulk and it's kind of low risk, it can be really useful. But the downside, we risk it being misleading. Any other upsides, downsides? One or two? Think about. Let's come up with an idea or concept, and we'll get it to write a pitch for us. Shall we? You could use this to shortlist companies you want to talk to for getting a job instead of using Google Maps or Google. Anything else? I mean, that's so it's quite generic, right? But, well, why don't we do this? Let's see what it comes up with. I mean, let's say, what should we ask for? Give me like how many words? Like 200 words or something? Right. Let's go and let's okay. It's going quite quick.
Wow, wow.
I suppose this might be less intensive, right? So let's read this then. So can we see that? So I want you to read that. Let's take a couple of minutes. It's important. I want you to read it, and then I want you to think. So is that okay? Is firstly, is it impressive? And then I want you to take another minute and think again, and then tell me, like, does it actually say anything? Hmm. Sounds good though, right? I mean, grammatically correct. So we could feed it other stuff. So we could say, well, look, focus on, a couple of bullet points of why being here is better. So like, top student union, etc. You can, because this is a contextual chat. Every session you create, it's building on what you've already said. So give me top 3 things that you wanted to work into that. So rework the above, or focus on, so top student union, great lecturers like Jon. One more. Okay, so top 5. So it'll regenerate. So it's kind of reworded it again. It'll create what we want it to, right? Now, just to give you a couple of other examples, you can, because it's contextually aware, and you can kind of train it. I've seen a kind of a humorous long discussion of where somebody is having a chat with it, saying, what's 2 plus 2, right? And it's 4, right? And it keeps on saying 4. And the person that's chatting said, no, it's 5. It's actually 5. You're wrong. And after about 10 attempts, it then changes to saying, it responding to what's 2 plus 2, it says 5. And ask it again, and it's 5. So you can kind of condition it based on what you feed it. Just a little bit worrying, right? Because surely that would amplify that can amplify negative things, right? And then we talk about things like bias. It's using information out in the world in a certain way, but just because, if you've considered biases, or just because some fact is true, doesn't necessarily mean because something else is true, etc. So we have to be careful. Again, so has this really said anything? Maybe it has started to say something. Okay, name drop Jon. It says I'm passionate about sharing my knowledge and experience with students. I mean, okay, it's just generic fluff, to be honest. That's, I think, the fundamental problem. If you want to write anything meaningful, it's very difficult to get anything meaningful out of it. I was doing a bit of work. I was writing a big submission for like my own reflective practice, and I had some bullet points, and I got it to expand. What I found was I wanted it to expand my bullet point notes into paragraphs. They kind of expanded it, but it just filled it with fluff, so it ended up just cutting it all back down again. So that's what it does. It just fills stuff with sensible sounding fluff. Now, the new version, I think it's just come out. Obviously things are going to get more advanced, so, and potentially scary advanced. But it can be useful as a just as a virtual assistant. So another thing, I was looking at some, it can be useful for inspiration. So I was sort of working on these sort of program design, and I wanted to get some suggestions on potential module titles within an overall topic, to kind of prompt me to, had I forgotten anything, get it to fill in any gaps for me. That can kind of be useful. It can potentially go and scour what's out there and bring stuff to you. And you don't go and copy and paste it, but it could be a useful tool. All right. Yeah. So I would say on the topic of, bringing it back into the classroom, on the topic of, you can obviously, you could try and get ChatGPT to write essays for you, right? The problem is it's fluff, right? It doesn't really say anything. And I would like to think I could just probably tell if the submission was written, copied and pasted ChatGPT, but who knows? I think it doesn't go to that level of, it can't yet sort of fake that kind of individual critical awareness and understanding and that personal human experience, right? So let's segue on to some of the other topics. People talk about AI when basically it's just like what I'd call an if statement. It's if this, do that. It's not AI. It also ties in with big data. Kind of big data in terms of, if we try and understand what is machine learning, and this comes back to the difference between, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it looks like human intelligence sometimes. What we have to remember is that fundamentally, and so this is getting a little bit philosophical, but the way AI works and the way ChatGPT can work, it's based on big data. When we talk about big data, we talk about all the data that's out in the world online. It kind of consumes it, and it can draw on it, and it can generate stuff from it. That is not how our brains work. So however it looks like it's emergent intelligence, it will always be fundamentally different to the way our sort of human chemistry and biology works. That's an important thing to remember. The same way with, if you talk about AI or machine learning in terms of, the supercomputers that could beat humans at chess, right? They aren't playing chess in the same way as the human. They are running thousands and millions of combinations of potential moves incredibly quickly. But how many moves can a human make in the head? Even the best? Not that many. There's a fundamental different approach, and that's actually what's quite magical about the human brain, in that it can still do those things and actually compete and actually be better than something that's, looking at so much data. So I think that's just an important, like, philosophical grounding, right? It's fundamentally different. Machine learning, like, what is it? I would say it's basically any kind of program that's able to adapt its behavior based on inputs, right? So based on the inputs that it's getting, the data that it's getting. So let's say in the context of marketing or business, can anybody think of any applications of like machine learning or big data in the context of marketing? I'll give you another example of that in a bit. I'm going to deliberately leave a spelling mistake in there to see if we get figure it out. I think it will. Context of marketing, anything else? Business strategy? Is that I'm gonna leave that spelling as well, just see what it does. Oh no. Maybe the spellings have freaked out. All right, so we'll let it chip away. Now, example of the personalized recommendations. So the thing is, the stuff that can come out of machine learning and big data, so based on recommendations, this is where it can get a bit weird. And actually, yeah, very weird. So you talked about like recommended products, right? So what big data machine learning can do, it can spot correlations that just humans would not be able to do. It can crunch all the data, it can crunch all the people's purchases, all their attributes, age, sort of gender preferences, where they live, etc., postcode, and it can look for correlations and then use those correlations to shove stuff in our face that it thinks we might want to buy, right? That's what Amazon is doing. Anybody here not using Amazon? Amazon's everywhere, right? I won't go on a rant about Amazon because we haven't got too long left. I'll give you an anecdote, a story. I think it's from the US. This goes back a little bit, where a company like a high street store started using machine learning and big data on their customer data. And there was a story of this kind of dad sort of phoned up or contacted the kind of chains, sort of furious, saying, "Look, why are you sending my daughter coupons for like pregnancy products?" He just didn't know she was pregnant. Turns out she was pregnant early on. She hadn't bought anything unusual from the shop, but her buying patterns had identified her as being likely pregnant. Therefore, they started sending irrelevant coupons. So dad found out she's pregnant because of machine learning. So even like basic stuff, it's not even machine learning, but as soon as you buy one thing from Amazon that kind of gives an anchor to you, either like having young kids, for example, which I've done. Amazon knows the age of my kids. I know it's going to start advertising like teenage stuff to me in a few years. Like it's just the way it is. So that's not even machine learning. That's just kind of using your data. But it can pick up these correlations and kind of do weird stuff with it. Also, I always like talking about this. Have you ever been like talking to a friend about something and then you get an advert for it like the next day?
All the time.
All the time. Okay.
Plenty of time. It's
Okay.
freaky.
Why do you think that is? Okay, because it listens. Okay. And any other suggestions? So if we're to believe Meta and WhatsApp, our messages are encrypted on WhatsApp. But what they do know is who's talking to who. So what have we ever thought, why is WhatsApp free and why did Meta pay so much for it? It tells them who knows who around the world. It gives them a social graph. Right? And what that means is actually they don't need to listen to our conversations. What we're finding when stuff is thrown at us, it might be that you're talking to a friend about, new pair of shoes or dress. It could be random. It could just be because an advertiser is paying for latest advertising on that product and you fit the demographic. So it could just be random, but it could also be because one person in your social graph checked it out on Google. And because you're in their social graph and you're similar age, we're saying gender, why would they not shove that in your face as well? You fit the profile because you're part of the social graph. They don't even have to have told you. So most of the time that might be happening. And would you know? No, because they haven't told you about it. But if they phoned you up and had a chat about it and then you see it, it's like, whoa, what just happened? And that's the thing. It's actually happening all the time. It's only because when we notice it freaks us out. And that's big data. That's machine learning kind of at a basic level. But it's using that massive data. That's why Meta bought WhatsApp, for data. Right? So they kind of know who we know and know who we talk to. They don't necessarily know what the messages are we send them, but they know when we talk to people and they know who's in our social graph. I delete my Facebook account, by the way. You don't have to. So yeah. Back on the topic of the terminology, we talk about machine learning and AI, they are all very convoluted. And actually, if you understand what's going on, it's not a case when you often see startups or businesses saying we're AI enabled or we use AI to do X, Y, and Z, right? That can mean absolutely anything. Nowadays, all these new AI generated startups, all they're doing is just plugging into ChatGPT in the back end. That's literally all they're doing. They're just using an API and talking to the system and then putting stuff back out. Other companies might be using big data, so finding correlations. Of course, what do we know about correlations? Correlations don't always equate to causation, but actually big tech and marketing, they don't care because if it increases the chances of, making money, then fantastic. Okay, did anybody have any burning questions or burning things they wanted to ask or throw in? So I think Google's become a verb, right? We just Google stuff now. In terms of its success, I mean, I would say if you look at the homepage of Google, let's go back in time. Have you used a Wayback Machine before? So let's go back. I don't know. Let's go back, 20 years or so. So Wayback Machine is pretty cool. It's snapshots websites, so you can also go back in time. There you go. So this was from 2000. This was Google's homepage. Actually, there's quite a few links there. Let's go back right to the beginning. This is 2000, and there you go, 1998. Let's go forward a bit. Anybody can use this. You won't be able to use the website. It's like a static copy. It's actually quite complicated here. But I think the success of Google came about because of its simplicity. Probably remember when they used to have "I'm feeling lucky" button where it just take you to the first result. It's kind of fun. But historically, it's always been a pretty simple homepage, right? Single box, no filters, drop downs, check boxes. Literally, just type in whatever you want, and it'll figure it out. And actually, it's become incredibly good at doing that. Right. So I've occasionally tested using other search engines, maybe more privacy focused search engines, and actually get really frustrated because Google is so good at what it does, mainly because of the other contextual cues. So it knows if, unless you block all the tracking, it will know, it knows your historical search, it knows sort of where you are, what country you're in. So actually that's really useful. I'm happy for Google to know that, because I mean, it's kind of, when I search for, if I search for, let's search for taxis. No, I'm on the wrong, I've actually used a Wayback Machine, which won't work. Did what I said wouldn't work. Right, okay. So it hasn't just given me taxis, it's given me taxis in High Wycombe, because it knows I'm connected from High Wycombe. That's contextual relevance. That's useful, right? And Google have got incredibly good at that. So they pull in all these different signals, and they kind of know what's more likely to be useful. So everybody's nowadays, I mean, it used to be like 10 or 15 years ago, marketers used to try and get, you want to get your website up in the search rankings, right? And we would used to track, like, oh, I'm ranking 10th for this keyword or 5th for this keyword. Now that kind of doesn't really make any sense, because every person's search results are different, tailored. So all we can do is kind of optimize and, yeah, sort of go from there. I think it's the way they've just made search so simple, but actually useful. So when we talk about cloud, I'll start with a bit of context, so you may or may not already know. So one of the biggest providers in sort of cloud computing is AWS, which is Amazon. AWS came about because Amazon were becoming such a huge sort of behemoth in the world that they kind of had their own data centers, right? They were building their own network, and they kind of realized, oh, wait, we're kind of building this awesome infrastructure. Why don't we start renting it out to people? And they started doing that. And now basically AWS, it kind of earns them billions. It's kind of the biggest moneymaker. There's Azure from Microsoft, also Google have their own Google Cloud, and there are others. And in terms of, so I suppose you're talking about like security and privacy, right? So there are different ways of using the cloud. So you can, if you go to AWS, you can say, I want a server and I want to do whatever I want on it, and I'm going to update it. I'm going to keep it secure. I just want it hosted there, and I want it to be kept online for me. So you can use the cloud like that, where you're kind of self-maintaining it. Now, for people like me, I'm kind of lazy and I don't have to worry about maintenance or upgrades. You can use, at the other end of the scale, is just, don't give me a server, just host this website for me. And I don't want to worry about how you're doing it. Just keep it online and make sure it scales and never goes offline. That's the other end of the scale. So I give up control for convenience. And I suppose that's the ultimate trade-off in all technology, right? You give up control for the return of convenience or somebody else looking after it. So using cloud in terms of security and privacy, it's one of those things where it comes down to, do you trust them? AWS obviously have a reputation to uphold. So it's not in their interest to kind of leak data or get hacked. Therefore, they're pretty good on that. And you could investigate things like, how do they keep their data centers secure? Only certain people will have access. I don't know if you remember, I think last year at some point, Facebook went down for like 12 hours or something. That was because of a misconfiguration that cascaded around all their networks, so that basically they couldn't even get into their own data centers, which is kind of amusing. So that was how security backfired. So you can kind of look at that level. And the danger is, if you try and manage your own services and you don't really know what you're doing, you could expect yourself to just, it's like leaving the front door key in your front door. If you don't know what you're doing, you can risk doing that. So it depends on what you're doing. You can set up permissions. If you get a server from AWS, you can set the root password, and for example, and you can do that on other similar services. So effectively, your little service is inside Amazon, but they actually can't break through the security, so they can't look at it. Same things with like Google and emails, right? You always use Gmail. It's like, what's to stop Google looking at our emails? And not to make you paranoid, but to a certain extent, it's almost like, well, they're, why would they? Even if they could, it's kind of a bit of a trade-off. But I think when it comes to companies that are reliant on, maybe they're dealing in like national secrets, or they're working for the government, sometimes they will have special arrangements with the cloud provider where they'll even have their own hardware will be physically separated from other hardware, or large organizations will actually just run their own data centers. They will literally own it, own the building, they'll manage their own security and kind of do it all themselves. So Facebook do that. Facebook don't piggyback on anything else. They own their own data centers, and yeah, I guess that gives them ultimate control. But last year, when they messed up, it was like their own fault, their own problem, that everything went down for like 12 hours. Hopefully that helps. But happy to continue the chat